link attributes that Google introduced with the different types of links, whether it's sponsored or so on. But they had made a statement earlier this week that they are just using those attributes at the moment to better understand how links are being used across the internet. They said whether you use them or don't use them, you shouldn't really see any difference, which is what I was actually thinking when I mentioned in the show that they are probably using those attributes at this moment just to gather more data and start developing.
Can we start?
Do you want to?
Yeah, I think that siren was horrible.
Okay.
I think it was super loud.
I think it's just natural, baby.
Oh, no, I think that siren sucked. All right. That's interesting. I mean, so they're not going to affect the ranking equation is what they're saying at all. It's all about understanding better. Maybe they're training rank brain.
Yeah, don't be alarmed like that siren. It's not a big deal, people. No, seriously, the links probably aren't, like even right before we started the show, we were talking about how Google isn't really trying to develop like their spammy link algorithm, and they're not probably focusing so much on links anymore. They covered so much of that in Penguin and things like that. They're not trying to just make little tweaks. They're at the point where they want to gather more data and then use that data, probably build that into their machine learning, rank brain and all that to really develop the algorithm ongoing. But yeah. So nothing probably to really look for right now. I don't know if we really want to start testing too much. We'll probably want to just throw some link attributes, see as things develop how they change.
Yeah, it's definitely worth some tests, but assuming we believe Google, right? They don't have any ulterior motives to lie to us.
No, not at all. And obviously they will use it eventually. You know what I mean? Or they're going to take it away, which they have done before.
I mean, that kind of goes right into that other link you shared with me this morning about when they said the core algorithm wasn't about net links, the core algorithm update.
Yeah.
And I just think, just like you said, like their link algorithms have been developed since the beginning of Google. That's
their claim to fame, really.
Like Google is about backlinks, right? And so they've developed that probably to the extent that it can, except for machine learning. That's the next stage.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to
AI.
That's probably what they're going to get ready to. Because right now, supposedly, their machine learning is more about semantics and context. But now it looks like possibly, is this now going to be about links now too in the future, right? Are they collecting all this data to make that next jump? But I think just from what manual refinements you could do on the link algos, they've been done. I mean, they've modified and tweaked the filters, the algos. Everything from original PageRank. I mean, you figure Backrub was all about links, and then PageRank, Reasonable Surfer, Hilltop, possibly Trusted Site, Seed Sites. I mean, there's just so much development and engineering that went into understanding links, filtering links, rating links. I mean, the next step then is to learn and use machine learning, I think. So.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, Google's comments on links seem to get more and more just vague as time goes on. One thing that they recently said, again, why would Google ever lie to us? There was a statement made about the fact that having a page force crawl doesn't make the link get any more relevance any quicker. I'm willing to bet, though, that if Googlebot crawls a link, it has more impact than if Googlebot doesn't crawl that link. So.
Well, yeah, because then they wouldn't even know the link exists.
Exactly.
To give any type of credit to it.
So saying pushing a force crawl, maybe Google just won't crawl it. But to say like, oh, that's not going to help in any way, I think that's kind of a general statement to make.
Well, I think kind of, so what I took from that when he said that, forcing your crawls, if you have to force a crawl, the links on that page probably won't help that much. You can't say that it won't help at all, but it does kind of make sense, though, that pages that Googlebot doesn't crawl very often have less of an impact if you get a mention from them, right? If they mention your web page, If you get that back scratch from that web page, that Googlebot just doesn't crawl very often because it's either a page that's super unimportant on the site or hasn't been updated forever. That makes sense that it could have less of an impact, but I think some of that right there is also covered under some of the link pats like Reasonable Surfer 2, where they kind of suggest that even and that was years ago. So to me, it's just, they're kind of rehashing the same old, that I would still bet the link does have value. I mean, there's been single variable tests out that, people have shown links from even like de-index sites have value.
But there is probably a weight mechanism.
There's
to
probably
it
a
then,
weighting,
yeah, exactly.
a value and a weighting, and then also remember anchor text, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people mess that up. If you're over commercialized, every link could be possibly a bad link.
Another statement they made about links too, which I thought was interesting, because the statement was essentially that the older a link gets, the less authority it could have. And as from an SEO standpoint, I always had the thought that the longer the link was in place, that the more authority it had. Their argument was, well, if you get a link on like a main site, like a big site, and it's on the home page, or it's on like the main blog page, and then after months and months it gets pushed further and further into the site, it's going to lose authority. But again, it's one of those general statements where, does the link really lose authority because it's older, or does it just lose authority because it's not getting as much authority from elsewhere?
And the pages, or the page or post is just not trafficked as much.
Exactly.
It's a lesser quality page.
Less interlinking, less direct linking, but if it didn't
No
move,
freshness factor on it. I mean, that's...
But I wonder if time is a authority. I wonder if there is anything in the algorithm that says that the longer the link is in place, the more authority it will have, assuming it doesn't lose backlinks, or almost like a domain, the age of a domain is loosely in the algorithm, you could say. Not so much anymore, but...
It's difficult to theorize on that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just interesting.
How many links does Google store the data on, and what type of requirement would it be to monitor all those links over time to take those into consideration?
Yeah.
So when you think about that from like a data storage point, capacity of their servers and stuff, just they've crawled links now for how many? Over a decade.
Yeah, since almost 2 decades. 2 decades.
It's been a long
2.5 decades, something like that. Yeah.
How much data about links are they storing? And then if they're actively somehow monitoring the value of those over a long period of time, I mean, it seems like that would be an enormous amount of data that I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be
It's
another
difficult to
caching
conceptualize.
mechanism.
I'm not an engineer.
I mean, honestly, it's probably one of Google's biggest hurdles is just the data and managing that. And that's probably one of their biggest struggles.
I
So
would think that at some point there would be some type of limitation to that, as to what they can monitor, how much they can monitor links after they initially do the crawl. I've often thought about that, because there's so many links that they crawl, they'd have to, I mean, and that's the same thing when people say, well, if the link gets traffic, it might have more value. I'd like to think so, but they'd have to actively monitor the referral traffic. I mean, I guess you could just pull it if you had analytics, they're already monitoring, but
how do you weight
that's
that
a small fraction, and
yeah.
to literally monitor it, just somebody clicking a link and monitoring that referral traffic and saying the link has more value in the ranking algorithm because of it, would require so much data storage, I think. I don't know.
It's the same concept when people talk about like link, patterns going like 9 links, deep, or like 9 or 10 or 50 levels, whatever. Like, it gets to a point where Google's not going to be able to like make those connections at this point because they just don't have the computing power. You know what I mean? Like, to say, okay, we're going to go back 50 links back on every backlink to determine true authority or relevance of a page. You know what I mean? It'd just be...
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, it could take you back to the very first link.
The
Right, like that,
first link
that's
on the internet,
seriously,
yeah.
like if they were monitoring all that stuff, theoretically, possibly there was a way to get back to that very first link.
They actually
Assuming
have
that it's,
age and all of them.
assuming, but in theory, it could be possible. I mean, if they were monitoring all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No, definitely.